Before the internet, before one-click ordering and next-day delivery, Christmas had a different kind of magic. It didn't arrive in an instant. It was built slowly, piece by piece, throughout the month of December. It was an analogue magic, a magic you could touch and smell and feel in the very air around you. So, let's fire up the time machine, shall we? Set the dial for the 1970s and unwrap the memories of a classic British Christmas. A Christmas of tinsel, turkey, and a TV guide that was more precious than gold. Our journey always began not at the North Pole, but within the thin, crinkly pages of the Argos Catalogue, or perhaps for you it was Littlewoods or Kays. It didn't matter. We all knew it by its true name, the Book of Dreams. It would arrive with a heavy, satisfying thud through the letterbox, and from that moment on, it was the most important piece of literature in the house. This was where Christmas wishes were forged. With a biro in hand, we would meticulously circle our heart's desire. The action man with his eagle eyes, the Cindy doll and her impossibly fashionable wardrobe, or the ultimate prize that took up 2 whole pages, the Skelectric set, a universe of screeching tyres and plastic chicanes that you just knew would cover the entire living room floor. You weren't just circling a toy, you were making a solemn, hopeful contract with Father Christmas. And then, as the days grew shorter and colder, the next great festive document would arrive, the Christmas edition of the Radio Times or the TV Times. This wasn't just a magazine, it was a sacred text, a battle plan for the most important week of television all year. The entire family would huddle around it, a highlighter pen passing between eager hands. A military operation of viewing was planned. What night was the James Bond film on? What time was the Morecambe and Wise Christmas special? Who would get the final say on what to watch on Boxing Day? It was all there in glorious print. The anticipation of watching those shows was almost as exciting as the shows themselves. It was a shared promise of laughter, adventure, and of the whole family gathered together in front of one small, flickering television. And, of course, there were the decorations. In the 70s, we didn't do minimalist chic. We did a chaotic, joyful explosion of colour. The Christmas tree, often a real one that shed needles everywhere, was draped in decorations that held years of memories. Fragile glass baubles, homemade oddities from school, and the star of the show, tinsel. Thick, chunky tinsel, and its impossibly fine cousin, lametta. Those shimmering strands of silver would get everywhere, and you'd still be finding them behind the sofa in July. And the lights, oh, the lights. A tangled string of chunky, colourful bulbs that, thanks to some cruel law of physics, would all go out if just one of them failed. It was an annual family tradition to spend at least an hour painstakingly checking each and every bulb, a true test of Christmas spirit. This was the build-up, a slow, delicious crescendo of excitement. Every circled toy, every highlighted TV show, every piece of tinsel hung on the tree was another note in the symphony of a 1970s Christmas. The best, however, was yet to come. The unique, silent magic of Christmas Eve was just around the corner. Christmas Eve had a hush of its own. The frantic energy of the preceding weeks seemed to melt away, leaving behind a quiet, humming anticipation. The world outside went dark and silent, but inside, the house was alive with the warm glow of the fairy lights and the rich smell of mince pies baking in the oven.
This was a night of rituals. The final secret parcels were wrapped in crinkling paper, their corners painstakingly folded, the sticky tape always managing to get stuck to itself. And then came the most important transaction of the year. A plate was carefully prepared for Father Christmas. A mince pie to keep his strength up, and a small glass of sherry, because surely he'd be tired of all that milk. And of course, a single crunchy carrot for Rudolph. It was a non-negotiable part of the deal. A final piece of evidence submitted to ensure your name remained firmly on the nice list. The last act before bed was hanging the stocking. For some, it was a giant festive sock. For others, it was one of Dad's actual socks, stretched and hopeful. You'd hang it on the fireplace or the corner of your bed, giving it a final empty pat. You knew with absolute certainty that when you saw it next, it would be transformed, lumpy and mysterious, containing a small universe of wonders. Trying to sleep on Christmas Eve was a fool's errand. You'd lie there in the dark, your ears straining for the sound of sleigh bells, your mind racing with the possibilities that the morning held. It was the calm before the most wonderful storm imaginable. And then it was morning. It always began with a jolt in the deep, dark hours when it was still officially nighttime, 5 a.m. You'd creep out of bed, perhaps nudge your sibling awake, and the waiting would begin. The parental decree was law. You are not to go downstairs before 7 o'clock. It was the longest 2 hours of the entire year, an eternity spent whispering, guessing, and staring at the crack of light under the door. When the release finally came, the first port of call was the stocking. Before the mountain of presents under the tree, this was the personal treasure trove. Your fingers would first find the customary lump in the toe, a satsuma, its citrus smell instantly mingling with the scent of pine from the tree. Then the crinkle of gold foil around chocolate coins, a shiny new 50p piece, and perhaps a comic book annual, the Beano or the Dandy, promising hours of mischief. It was an appetizer, a perfect collection of small joys that only heightened the suspense. Then, you'd finally turn to the main event under the tree. The living room, once tidy, was transformed within minutes into a joyous, paper-strewn battlefield. The sound of ripping paper was the soundtrack of the morning, punctuated by gasps of delight. There it was, the action man you'd circled, the Cindy doll you dreamed of, the sheer, unadulterated bliss of seeing that box in real life. But this bliss was often followed by the 3 most dreaded words in the English language. Batteries not included. A sudden panic. A frantic search through kitchen drawers, a desperate plea for your dad, who would inevitably have to perform emergency surgery on the television remote control just to bring your new robotic dog to life.
It didn't matter. The chaos was part of the magic. The room filled not just with toys, but with the smell of new plastic and the limitless potential for adventure. And as you sat there, amidst the beautiful wreckage of paper and boxes, you knew the day had only just begun. The grand feast and the flickering glow of the television were still to come. As the morning's excitement began to settle, a new energy started to build from the kitchen. The air, once filled with the scent of pine and new plastic, now carried the rich, savoury promise of the main event. The smell of roasting potatoes, the deep aroma of gravy, and the unmistakable, slightly controversial scent of Brussels sprouts. The call to the dinner table was a summons to the very heart of Christmas Day, and at its centre was the turkey, gleaming and golden, a magnificent sight. But the feast was about so much more than the food. It was about the ritual. It was about the Christmas crackers. You'd cross your arms, linking with your neighbours, and with a collective pull and a series of gentle pops, the table would be showered in treasures. Out came the flimsy paper hats in shades of electric blue and shocking pink, which everyone, from your granddad to your little sister, was legally obliged to wear. Out came the terrible, groan-inducing jokes that were so bad they were brilliant. And out came the tiny, baffling plastic prize, a miniature magnifying glass, a little spinning top, or a fortune-telling fish, utterly useless, and yet absolutely essential. After the last roast potato was fought over, the final boat of gravy emptied, came the grand finale, the Christmas pudding. It would arrive from the kitchen, dark and mysterious, often wreathed in blue flames from a generous dousing of brandy, a taste of rich, fruity history on a spoon. With the meal over, a pleasant, sleepy fullness would descend upon the house. The great Christmas dinner coma had begun, and this was the signal for the second main event of the day. At 3 o'clock, a quiet would fall. Teacups were stilled, conversations paused. The entire nation seemed to stop as we all gathered round the television for the Queen's speech. It was a moment of quiet tradition, a thread that connected our little living room to millions of others across the country. And once Her Majesty had wished us all a happy Christmas, the real television extravaganza began. This was the moment we'd planned for with the TV times. This was Morecambe and Wise. It was Eric and Early singing and dancing their way into the nation's heart, delivering punchlines so perfect the whole family would roar with laughter. For that 1 hour, they were as much a part of Christmas as the tree itself. This was followed almost certainly by a blockbuster film, James Bond saving the world one more time, or Steve McQueen planning a great escape. As evening drew in, the day entered its final, gentle phase. The pace slowed, the main lights were switched off, leaving only the soft, multicolored glow of the fairy lights. This was the time for lazy contentment, a time for playing with new toys, for attempting to understand the rules of a new board game. It was the time for the big round tin of Quality Street or the blue tin of Cadbury's Roses. The sound of the lid being prized off was the starting pistol for the great chocolate debate. Who would get the last purple one? And later, just when you thought you couldn't possibly eat another thing, came the leftovers. The cold turkey sandwich, perhaps with a bit of stuffing and cranberry sauce. A simple, quiet pleasure that for many was the most delicious taste of the entire festive season.
That was a 1970s Christmas. It wasn't about extravagance. It was built from small, cherished traditions. The magic wasn't in the price of the gift, but in the months of anticipation leading up to it. It was in the shared experience of a terrible cracker joke, the collective laughter at a TV special, the simple comfort of a family all together warm and safe in the glow of the Christmas tree lights. It was a simpler time, perhaps, but the magic was all the more powerful for it. And that is why, all these decades later, those analogue memories still shine so very brightly in our hearts. So that was our journey back to a 1970s Christmas. But of course, that's only part of the story. Now, I'd love to hear yours. What was the one toy you desperately circled in the catalogue year after year? What was the television special that truly meant Christmas had arrived in your house? And the most important question of all, was it a tin of Quality Street or Cadbury's Roses that sat on your coffee table? Let us know down in the comments. I read every single one, and there's nothing better than sharing these wonderful memories together. If this trip down memory lane brought a smile to your face, please consider giving this video a thumbs up, and perhaps share it with a friend or family member who might enjoy it too. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Nostalgia Brit and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the past. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, stay nostalgic.